Productive Pastor 27, the 3 phases of productivity. What's going on, my friends? Chad here, Productive Pastor 27. We're back. You know, we're here every week, but it's always fun to say that we're back. I hope your week's going well. You know, I know from our stats, a lot of y'all listen to this on Thursdays and Fridays, and so hope you're looking forward to a cool weekend. I hope you're going to get to do some cool stuff, all that sort of thing. So today we're talking about the 3 phases of productivity, kind of like the 3 realizations we go through, what characterize those, what are the qualities, but also what does it mean to move from one space to the next. You know, productivity is not a linear thing. It's a fluid thing. It's cyclical. It moves and changes. And there might be parts of your life that are highly productive, and there might be parts of your life that are like the exact opposite, or you might be going through a funk right now or whatever. There's 3 phases to it, and we're going to talk about it. Before we jump into that, I just want to make sure you know about the 515 email. This went live a couple of weeks ago. We've had dozens of pastors go through it already. It is all about finding and creating focus and clarity. It's an email course. It's free. It goes to you every morning for 5 days. Gives you a 15-minute exercise to accomplish that day. And so go to the show notes, revchadbrooks.com/PPP/027 to jump into that, because I'd love to have you on there. Folks have found it to be super valuable. And every one of the exercises are just things that I've developed over the last couple of years as I go through, you know, honestly, 3 phases of productivity and just learn to manage those ebbs and flows. So would love to see you in there. It's 100% free. It's easy. It's an email in 15 minutes. You got the time for that. And so go cruise over there and grab that. But let's talk about these 3 phases of productivity. Okay? 3 phases. And this is what I am calling them. Phase 1 is a jumbled mess. Phase 2 is about lists and time, and phase 3 is having a strategic work plan. Those are the 3 phases. And so let's just go straight into it. So the idea of a jumbled mess, like what does this mean when you just have no productivity whatsoever at all? It's when you're living in jumbled mess. You're highly reactive. Every single thing you do is not planned. It's not strategic. It's literally just reacting to the thing that's put in front of you in that moment. And so this is what happens when you go into the office and you might know 1 or 2 things you need to do that day, but you'll fill up 10 hours just reacting and responding to stuff. You know, this first phase of productivity, a jumbled mess, this is when you're writing Saturday night sermons. Because you just cannot find the time to drill down, to focus during the week, to work on that big task that most pastors have to do weekly. Another thing that kind of characterizes a jumbled mess is that you're chasing ideas and you're collecting hacks. Like, you're aware that everything is crazy town, but you think you just have to find the one little tool, the one little hack, the one little thing that's going to make every single thing perfect. You know, there's a couple of qualities that are part of the jumbled mess, the things that just are there. You know, one is the belief that working harder will fix everything. That's just, okay, I'm going to just work harder, it'll be perfect. Work harder, work harder, work harder. That's one of the qualities. The second one is that an attentiveness to everything will fix everything. So if you're getting 100% of yourself to 100% of the things, then your life will be 100% perfect. Your ministry will be 100% thriving. Everything will just be where it is, but I've got to be able to give my attention to every single thing. Another quality is there's a false pathway out of the jumbled mess, and that's hustle culture. If you can't tell that one of the qualities of this season is just working way too much and working way too hard. Another quality that really characterizes the jumbled mess is that you're distracted easily. And it goes back to being reactive about things or only responding to things. And that's going to make you context switch constantly, which destroys your focus, which destroys your ability to do deep work. So that's this first phase of productivity, the jumbled mess. The second phase of productivity, what I'm calling lists and time, it looks like this. When you go into this mode, you're beginning to set boundaries here. You're beginning to you learn to say yes and no, and learning how you say yes and no, and that uniqueness is there. The next thing is this, that your schedule moves beyond just appointments. Now, in the jumbled mess, in the previous phase, you have a schedule, but the only thing that's on that schedule is appointments and meetings. That there is nothing in between that. So that is the cesspool of hustle that exists there. When you move into lists and time, your schedule moves beyond just appointments. It's this awareness, maybe if you're getting the Productive Pastor emails, and like last episode, we talked a lot about like energies and your energy blocks and where you do things best. You begin to schedule things like, okay, hey, on Tuesday mornings, I'm going to work on worship planning and my sermons because it's not Monday. I'm well rested and I tend to work better in the mornings. And so your schedule begins to move beyond just the appointments that are there. You also begin gaining an awareness of the priorities that you have. Like I said, it goes with boundaries. It's the ability to say yes and no to things. And as you say yes and as you say no, you're able to start understanding and really admitting to yourself, okay, this is a priority. And since it's a priority, it means this is more important than other things. And it's so hard to do in ministry because we everything's important. Like everything matters. We're dealing with eternal consequences here. So this is not what is important to everybody and to the whole, but it's an awareness of this is the thing that needs me most in this particular time. So some of the qualities that we see inside of this list and time is this. People that are in this phase can say, they can answer the question, why am I doing this? Like I said, they're those basics, those yeses and those nos, those priorities. They can say, this is why I'm doing this. A person who's in lists and time, this phase 2 of productivity, they're starting to look for team members to cover their weak points. So they've given up on this idea that their attentiveness to everything will fix everything. They know where they're weak. They know where they're strong. And they began building teams, whether volunteer or whether staff, to cover their weak points so they can focus more on their strength points that are there. The next thing is in the qualities is these folks are able to begin managing negative distractions. Okay, so a negative distraction is the things that would seek to tear you down, the things that would seek to derail you, the interruption, like that sort of a thing. These negative distractions, the things that take away from you. This goes back to the priority piece. They're beginning to just sort this thing out and have just a healthy understanding. Now, a lot of us would love to live. The list and time sounds pretty good. I mean, like I said, especially, productivity is not linear. It's cyclical. If every one of our areas of life was in the list and time, we would probably be a pretty satisfied person. But that's only the second phase of productivity. The third phase of productivity is what I call strategic work plan. Okay. Now, the first part of this, it allows for variability. As you're in that second phase, you're making ministry, and the stress point, the anxious point is it feels really, really rigid. When someone's in phase 3 productivity, they're okay with the variability that comes in with ministry. I had an episode a few episodes back on 80% scheduling. That's allowing for variability. There's a calmness and an approach to folks like this that are there. The next person that's in this phase 3, they have the ability to create dones. And this is that thing in ministry that's so difficult, how most of ministry never actually finishes. It just hits another cycle. But they've learned what the power to close things out looks like. And what this normally is they're not overworking it anymore. Okay? They're not tweaking it. I'm a tweaker. I always want to be making things incrementally in small percentage points better. But a person that's in this phase 3, that they're this is done. That's good enough. That's going to do what it needs to do. A person who's in phase 3 productivity, they manage their energy and their expectations. If they wake up and they know that one morning is just going to be an absolute bust for different reasons, okay, no big deal. I can burn a half day, or I can burn a day, and it's not going to radically change anything. So they manage their energy, they manage their expectations, they're able to go into a week saying, man, I've got a lot of things that are really important to take care of. And so I am not going to watch Amazon Prime and like binge the Rings of Power until 3:00 in the morning, because I know I'm going to need this energy in 48 hours. So they're managing their industry and their expectations. The fourth thing that they're doing is that they're strengths and priority focused. So they know where they belong the most and the best. And when that is a space that's desperately needed at that time, they're able to be there for that. Now, this is one of those things that seems out of reach for just the normal, everyday sized church. But so much of this, if you're not hearing this as phase 3, this is a calmness that pervades most things. And this idea of this person saying, we might say this thing is really important, but it is outside of my skill set. And that's not going to match up well. So let's either rethink the project, or we need to find someone new to be at the center of this. And a lot of these times for pastors that are in phase 3, they don't need to be at the center of things. They have learned about what it means to move past that, and their ministries have also learned to move past what this means. In a lot of ways, phase 3 productivity is about an equilibrium of the pastor's skill and the church's needs and expectations and mission. So the qualities of this, and a lot of this, you're going to catch some opposites here. So like the quality of a person in phase 3 productivity is this. They can answer the question, why am I not doing this? Phase 2 lists in time, they can say why I am doing this. Phase 3 person can say why I am not doing this. The next one is this. They are looking for team members that are better than they are. Phase 2, it's looking for team members who can cover your weak points. Phase 3 is looking for people that are better than they are in things. The last thing is, they're able to manage positive distractions. Phase 2 is they're managing negative distractions. Phase 1 is distractions are my bro. But a phase 3, it's like this. Yesterday I got out of the shower. Tuesday mornings for me is creating. I'm doing a bunch of writing. I'm working on stuff, and I get out of the shower, and I've got this fantastic idea for a blog post. And my plan is, I'm going to take some time away from what I wanted to focus on, and I'm going to go and I'm going to write that blog post because it's going to be great, but it's kind of time sensitive with the current moment. It needs to go out in the next couple of weeks. So I need to do this. And by the time I got to my office, I was so proud of myself. I realized, you know what, Chad? That was a great shower idea, but it is not more important than what you already had scheduled to work on. So that was a positive distraction. I had convinced myself, and in theory, it could be a good thing to do, but it wasn't the right thing to do. That's that sifting that you see happen between phase 2 and phase 3. And I was very proud of myself that there's a thing in my life that I know, like, oh yeah, I did that. That was phase 3. Heck yeah, Chad. Because phase 3 is not a mirror reflection of Chad Brooks, my friends. Trust me. So those are the 3 phases, okay? So there is the idea of jumbled mess, there's lists in time, and then there's a strategic work plan. But let's talk about what does it mean to transition between those 2 spaces. So transitioning from point 1 to point 2, from jumbled mess to lists and time. Number 1, there's going to be low points that are there, and something's going to have to trigger this motion. That low point is probably going to be some sort of a pretty big mistake. And I think that grace being there, grace being part of that thing is what's going to realize, okay, I need to make some changes, and people are supportive of my change that's there. So right here, I'll tell you again, the 515 email list. It's an incredible way to find focus and find clarity and get out of the jumbled mess haywire that's there. But it's just like any other just major problem. You're going to have to realize something has to be done. And what I've seen more often than not in my own life and in the lives of those I coach, what you see here is things get pretty bad, and there's a lot of grace extended to the moment, but you realize that things have to change. There's also the Season 1 workbook. It's about building up personal awareness. Those first few sections that are part of there are incredible just to help you get a clear picture of the current reality. The next thing about that transition from 1 to 2 is that you realize that being a generalist won't work. That whole idea of everything needs 100% of your attention, you have to start realizing, okay, being a generalist is not healthy for me. It's destructive for the ministry. It's not a good thing. And so it's okay for me to begin realizing where my own special skills and passions and these sorts of things align with, and that it's okay to begin guiding my priorities around that. And it's also a realization of, hey, I'm going to stop working outside of reactivity. You know, there's a level of response. I think response is so much of a healthier word than reactivity. Yes, there is response in ministry. There are things that you have to jump on. That's not being reactive. You know, reactivity is the same thing as like having, oh, wow, this is a great idea, and we chase this for 10 days. And then, oh, we've got another good idea, and we chase this for a week. And you spend a lot of your time, and if you have a staff around you, you're spending your staff's time just being reactive on like chasing the next big best thing. You begin stopping to work out of reactivity and saying, okay, no, let's talk about intentionality that's here. And so that's this transition point, I think, that you find between phase 1 and phase 2. Now, let's talk about the true phase 2 from listen time to phase 3, which is a strategic work plan. The first is this, that you begin to see Sabbath taking a priority on there. That Sabbath, the deep theological practice of stopping. And I feel like that is crucial because it's you realizing, okay, I'm not going to work for a day, and the world is not going to fall apart all around me, or my church is not going to fall apart all around me. So Sabbath is this huge piece that's part of this. The next thing is this, and I think you have to have Sabbath down in order to give yourself the permission to do the next thing. These are folks who understand the benefit of strategic retreating. Okay, so this is not taking a rest, taking a break, but saying, all right, I'm stepping away for a season of time to do deep work inside and for the ministry, and I'm giving the staff permission to do the same thing, and I'm going to take the staff and or key leaders away for strategic time as well. And if you were doing this with staff and with leaders, this is the thing, you're probably going to have to teach them about Sabbath as part of this practice. And if you do this with team folks and with staff, you're going to have to combine the idea of strategic work and spiritual rest at the same time. But none of this, you can't do any of this if you're not practicing Sabbath first, and if you're not practicing and seeing the value and others seeing the value of the strategic retreating that you are doing. You know, phase 3, a piece of this as well, is a church is not just comfortable, but is encouraging their pastor to not be a generalist, but to be a specialist. So that's the next thing. The phase 2 to phase 3 is that being a specialist is all right, but it's also really hard to do that in a way that isn't self-fulfilling. When I do strengths work with people on one-on-one coaching, one of the things we talk about is raw versus mature. And a raw strength or a raw talent like that is going to be self-focused. It might be a great skill and that you're using, but ultimately it's going to be about making you better. A mature space is saying, this is a good thing I'm doing. I am good at what I'm doing, and this makes other people better. That's that raw, mature thing. And so your specialization is not just making you better or you healthier or you having more fun, but your specialization is good for the whole. You know, the third space, this strategic working plan, it's really about realizing the best thing I can do for everyone is also to not do certain things. And so you think about it. You might have a particular skill that at certain times is very, very necessary, but it's not always necessary. It's realizing, hey, let's let somebody else drive the truck right now. I don't need to be driving this. We've got a better person that can do this than me right now. And so that's part of that third space transition. It's also realizing that proactive isn't the opposite of reactive, but it's an intentional choice. So this is where you see that move from 2 to 3. Now, these 3 phases, a couple of things I want you just to realize. You know, productivity is never done, productivity, especially go back a few episodes to that episode I did on what is productivity. And some of y'all have heard my own journey. I'm not going to go into this right now, but over the last 10 years, because we're pushing 10 years since the first episode of The Productive Pastor rolled out, I have changed tremendously about this. And for me now in this moment, productivity is about awareness. It's not about finishing. There's the piece of strengths, the raw and mature, of the self-focused or others-focused. This is never done. What might be an insanely mature strength in one situation, if you try to apply it in the same manner to another situation, it becomes incredibly self-focused. When I say that this is productivity, it's not linear. It's cyclical. It's seasonal. It's three-dimensional. Growth works in funny ways. When we become settled in something, we can easily drift backwards. When our life grows, our abilities can also then go backwards because our life has grown and our abilities have not grown. And if you look at these three phases, that way you can see, wow, I've got different pieces of my life that are probably functioning in different phases. I've got different sides of my ministry and my leadership that are focusing these things. And the way around this is not always to work more. Realize that was that phase one idea. And that might be a good way of identification. If you've got something going on in your life that you feel like the answer to is just to work harder, maybe you need to pull back and say, okay, why am I living in a phase one reality inside of this? Because, friends, this is always not about getting more done. This is not about getting bigger, getting better, that sort of thing. It's about being able to live your call and your context in a way that's healthy. Healthy to you, healthy to your family, healthy to your church. In this post-COVID reality, we have this exhaustion that comes with overwork, but there's also in ministry, one of the things I hear from people as I talk with them every day almost, is this, I don't feel like I'm ever doing a good job. Guys, there's a tendency we have to overthink, to overwork, to overdo, to overhustle, all of these things. And even in incredibly good places, this can be incredibly destructive. And I don't want you to experience that. So these three phases are offered up to you. And this is what I would encourage you to do. Just think about, the handful of if you could categorize, your ministry in 3 or 4 titles, 3 or 4 things. Like I have a teaching ministry, I've got my administrative, that kind of thing. And just think about, okay, where am I inside of this? And go back to those move throughs. What does it mean if you've got an area of your ministry, of your life, or something that's just absolutely inside of phase one? Think about, okay, how do I move into just focus and awareness and just get out of the grind culture that comes there? To think through what those things are, I'd love to hear from you about the work that you did to do that. If you want to try to work together on that and be intentional and focused, that's something we can absolutely do. There's a link to that in the show notes. But these 3 phases, imagine what it could be like if you were able to get more rather than less of things inside of phase 3. So I'm Chad. This is Productive Pastor. It is always a blessing and a thrill to be inside of your ears each week with the podcast. I'd love to see you over the Productive Pastor community on Facebook, the Productivity Party. Come hang out with us over there. There's always a lot of fun stuff that's going on. But I will be back in the next episode. I can't wait to see you until then.